Johnny Morrissey served as the CEO of the high-profile Nero Vodka Company, while simultaneously running an elaborate money laundering operation for the Spanish cartel led by Danielle Kinahan. The sensitive nature of Morrissey's illicit business would typically lend itself well to discretion. However, the man and his stylish moll, Nicola, exerted very little effort in protecting their wealth and status from the public eye. As the Scotland-based vodka firm's bosses, the Morrisseys regularly appeared in paparazzi photos with well-known celebrities and business bigwigs. They were also known for hosting opulent fundraising galas, including a special gladiator-themed bash held at Marbella's five-star Puente Romano Hotel. Johnny and Nicola's fast-paced lifestyle and the exorbitant wealth they often showcased publicly eventually drew the attention of American authorities, just as Nero Vodka was preparing to expand operations to the US. Investigators began to take a closer look at the Morrisseys in the summer of 2022. With the increased spotlight now fixed squarely on their illegal dealings, Johnny and Nicola swapped their multi-million-dollar Marbella mansion for a modest hideaway flat in an attempt to mitigate suspicions. Following the move, they reportedly became despised by their new neighbors, frequently getting into disputes with locals, including the community president. The Morrisseys weren't long for their new living situation, however, as local police swooped in to arrest them in September of 2022. Johnny had reportedly laundered more than $200 million for the Kinahan cartel over the previous 18-month period. As the conniving couple awaited their legal proceedings, it emerged that Danielle Kinahan himself was furious at his former money launderer for flaunting his wealth so publicly, thereby drawing suspicions from law enforcement. Number 6. Jo Emma Lavin. Jo Emma Lavin, a British glamour model and the ex-girlfriend of Welsh boxer Joe Calzaghe, came under law enforcement scrutiny for her alleged role in a $125 million smuggling ring. Lavin began participating in the illicit enterprise in September of 2020 when she was tasked with carrying suitcases full of cash on board a flight to Dubai. She reportedly met with a handler at a Starbucks in Knightsbridge before being picked up by a driver and taken to Heathrow. The model was accompanied by 27-year-old Amy Harrison. Upon arrival at the airport, she texted her partner Jonathan Johnson saying she was nervous. In court, Lavin would attempt to attribute the message to first-day nerves, indicating she had no idea she was working for a criminal organization. She claimed that at the time she was under the impression that she was employed directly by the United Arab Emirates. Lavin made a second trip with Johnson in which they smuggled $3.5 million, using ordinary holiday items to disguise the cash, which was divvied up into 8 different suitcases. After authorities caught on to the woman's exploits, she was arrested and charged with transferring criminal property, as were Johnson, Harrison, and 2 other co-defendants named Liam Rabone and Beatrice Orty. The individual who spearheaded the operation was identified as 48-year-old Abdullah Al-Falassi from Dubai. He was jailed for 9 years in July of 2022. Despite her claims of innocence, 44-year-old Lavin was found guilty in court during the spring of 2023. Number 5. Danielle Stafford. Although Danielle Stafford led a seemingly ordinary life as an engineer in the English village of Cottingham, the 29-year-old was known to spend inordinate sums of money splurging on lavish vacations, investment properties, and other luxury items. No one seemed to question how the woman was obtaining the funds to bankroll her lavish lifestyle until she was pulled over by the police on the evening of May the 12th of 2020. Stafford was behind the wheel of a silver Audi heading towards Hull city centre along Priory Road. Officers allegedly clocked her travelling above the posted speed limit and subsequently initiated a traffic stop. What began as a routine police procedure quickly developed into a more serious investigation. Law enforcement detected the pungent stench of marijuana upon approaching Stafford's Audi. The woman reportedly handed them a small wrap containing 2 buds of cannabis skunk and claimed that was all she had. However, following a more extensive search of the car, officers uncovered a carrier bag full of marijuana behind the driver's seat. Additional bags of cannabis were found on Stafford's person. and she was consequently detained. While she was being brought to the police station, the woman's phone repeatedly rang. She received upwards of 30 phone calls and 20 text messages, which the police found suspicious. Stafford was also seen fidgeting with her pants, and shortly thereafter, officers removed a bag containing a large amount of cocaine from between her legs. Additional drugs with a street value of approximately $40,000 were found at the woman's home, as was $34,000 in cash. As it subsequently emerged, Stafford had been living a double life as a drug kingpin for roughly 3 years. The illicit business enabled her to live well above her means as an engineer without touching any of her job salary. Around the fall of 2017, the woman had begun dealing cannabis as an enthusiast. However, her criminal exploits eventually escalated to the point where she was dealing cocaine and heroin as well. Stafford attempted to downplay her involvement in the drug trade, claiming she'd been manipulated into her life of crime by a man from Liverpool. She initially denied all 9 offenses levied against her, but ultimately pleaded guilty to 4 charges. At Hull Crown Court in April of 2023, Stafford was sentenced to 7.5 years behind bars. Number 4. The Albanians. Residents of the Gascoigne estate in Barking, London, were terrorized by the emergence of Albanian gangsters in their community. The so-called Albanian Gang gained widespread notoriety in 2017, when many of their members started releasing rap music videos in which they bragged about their various criminal endeavors. In January of 2023, an East London woman told the press that the gangsters routinely behave in an intimidating manner in order to strike fear into locals and assert their dominance. The same resident, who lived on the estate for over 2 decades before the Albanians began their reign of terror, said she once stumbled upon a large knife near her home. She also spoke about a particularly harrowing night on which she was jolted awake by the sound of her dogs barking. Upon hearing a commotion outside, the woman opened her front door to find armed police officers taking aim at her and screaming for her to get back inside. She later learned that local law enforcement had been conducting a raid aimed at dismantling a rent-a-gun operation in southeast England. 10 individuals were taken into custody for numerous offenses, including conspiracy to possess a firearm with intent to endanger life and conspiracy to commit great bodily harm with intent. Back in 2016, 3 Albanians had been jailed for more than 42 years in connection with the gang's criminal activity. However, as of 2023, the group was still wreaking havoc on the Barking community. They openly flaunt their wealth and various weaponry on social media, where they've amassed nearly 100,000 followers. Number 3. Joseph de Normandy and Christopher Wetmore. On the night of November the 20th of 2014, New York City police descended upon the East 23rd Street apartment belonging to Quest agency model Christopher Wetmore. The 25-year-old previously appeared in GQ Style magazine and modeled for prominent brands such as Rocawear and Diesel. Wetmore was charged with criminal sale of a controlled substance and conspiracy. He'd been participating in a cocaine and LSD delivery service run out of an apartment in Chelsea. A fellow male model by the name of Joseph de Normandy was likewise arrested for taking part in the drug ring. 20-year-old de Normandy reportedly sold acid and $2,500 worth of cocaine to an undercover cop, insisting the substances had been tested by a chemist for purity. Julia Arcia, the teen daughter of a former Brooklyn prosecutor, was also alleged to have taken part in the drug deals. However, her lawyer contended that she'd only been present for the illicit transactions because of her boyfriend, who was involved in the drug trade as well. 25-year-old Wetmore ultimately pleaded guilty to his crimes and was consequently jailed for 90 days. The punishments doled out for his co-defendants wasn't made clear. Number 2. The Casa Monica clan. Italy's Casa Monica mob rose to notoriety in the area of the Castelli Romani and the Lazio coast during the 1980s and 90s. The members were said to take part in a wide variety of criminal activities. At its peak, the organization was generating millions of dollars from illegal money lending and drugs as part of a complex criminal network in the city of Rome. The gang became known for charging excessively high interest rates on loans. Victims of the Casa clan were often issued threats of violence to prevent them from going to the authorities. Members of the clan would often flaunt the extravagant trappings of their wealthy lifestyles on social media. A Casa mobster named Ottavio Spada posed in several photographs showcasing luxury items such as Rolex watches, which were described as a symbol for the gang. In the summer of 2018, reports surfaced regarding a large-scale Italian police raid targeting the gang at their illegally constructed luxury villas on the outskirts of Rome. The law enforcement operation involved upwards of 250 officers and led to the arrests of 33 suspects, including Spada. If you haven't yet seen our video on when ignoring barriers goes wrong, then we have that lined up for you immediately after number 1. Stay put if you'd like. Number 1. Angie San Clemente, Valencia. On December the 13th of 2009, the police at Ezeiza International Airport in Argentina intercepted a 21-year-old female flyer with a suitcase containing suspicious cargo. The young woman, identified only as Ariel L., was detained after she tried to board a flight to Cancun with over 120 pounds of cocaine in her luggage. Ariel had reportedly made no attempts to conceal the illicit substances, which led investigators to believe that there were members of airport staff helping the smuggling ring, for which she was working as a courier. After questioning the young woman, authorities arrested 3 other suspects and issued a warrant for the arrest of Angie San Clemente, Valencia. The latter initially rose to prominence by winning the Reinado Nacional del Café, a Colombian beauty pageant, back in 2000. 2 days after the victory, however, she was forced to give up her crown, as it was determined that she was married at the time, in violation of the competition's rules. Valencia had previously dated a Mexican drug lord known as The Monster. Following their split, the woman established a rival drug empire, allegedly recruiting other models, whom she referred to as her unsuspicious beautiful angels, to serve as traffickers. She'd reportedly pay them up to $5,000 per trip to smuggle cocaine from Argentina to England by way of Cancun. That was Ariel L's planned route on the day she was apprehended, the day Valencia's life of crime began to unravel. The drug baroness went into hiding after her associate's arrest, but she was ultimately located in Buenos Aires in May of 2010. In the media, Valencia became known as the narco queen because of her looks and upscale sensibilities. Upon her arrival in Argentina, the woman had reportedly flown first class with a Pomeranian dog in her lap, further cementing her luxurious public image. Valencia was ultimately given a prison sentence of 6 years and 8 months for her criminal exploits. She was released after serving only half of her term, after which she was deported back to her home country of Colombia and banned from ever returning to Argentina. Number 9. River Rosenkist. Shortly after closing hours on December the 29th of 2021, a maintenance worker at Florida's Naples Zoo entered an unauthorized area of the facility. He crossed the fence barrier and put his arm through the fencing of a tiger's enclosure. The 26-year-old man, identified as River Rosenkist, proceeded to either pet or feed an 8-year-old Malayan tiger named Echo. The animal then attacked him, grabbing his arm and pulling it into the cage. Rosenkist called the emergency services to ask for help, and when a deputy arrived at the scene, he saw the worker with his arm in the feline's mouth. At first, the officer kicked the fence to try and scare Echo, hoping that he would let go of Rosenkist's arm. Seeing as the animal wouldn't budge, he pulled his gun out and shot it dead. Later reported he'd been forced to do so in order to save Rosenkist's life. The latter suffered serious injuries and was airlifted to a nearby hospital. Doctors managed to save his arm, and the Collier County Sheriff's Office announced he wouldn't be criminally charged in the death of the tiger. Number 8. Fabian Arduin. Mechanical engineering student and part-time model, Fabian Arduin was hiking with a group of friends and his girlfriend through Australia's Royal National Park on June the 8th of 2014. The park is home to the Wedding Cake Rock attraction, which is fenced off and features signs warning that it could fall at any time. In spite of the clearly stated dangers, the sandstone rock formation is a favorite among daredevil photo enthusiasts. and local authorities have reportedly struggled to keep people from it. 23-year-old Arduin, who had previously worked as a rock climbing instructor in France for approximately 4 years, deviated from the safe path to reach the edge. Arduin was allegedly hanging from the side of the rock when it crumbled in his hands, causing him to lose his grip. Other reports stated that he'd slipped while jumping from a lower tier to an upper portion of the sandstone formation. In the moments that followed, he plummeted over 130 feet, or about half the height of a giant sequoia tree, to the turbulent waters below. Due to high winds and rough seas, it took rescuers roughly 6 hours to find Arduin's lifeless body. Number 7. Cheryl Mori. 33-year-old Cheryl Renee Mori was trying to scale a fence surrounding an outdoor swimming pool in Greer, South Carolina, on July the 7th of 2015. While accompanied by a friend at around midnight, the mother of 3 started climbing the wrought iron fence, trying to reach the neighborhood pool. During the attempt, Mori lost her footing and fell onto the metal structure, resulting in her leg and pelvis region being impaled by a spike. Her friend consequently called 911. Emergency workers had to cut the fence in order to free Mori, and she was rushed to the hospital with part of the metal spike still embedded in her leg. Her wound resulted in critical blood loss, as the spike appeared to have severed at least one major artery. Doctors performed emergency surgery on her, but the woman was ultimately pronounced dead. Number 6. Leanne. A woman in her 30s, only identified as Leanne, visited the Wildlife World Zoo near Phoenix, Arizona on March the 9th of 2019. When she reached the jaguar's cage, Leanne leaned over the barrier, keeping visitors at a safe distance from the deadly predator. The jaguar then pushed its paw through a hole in the fence and clawed at the woman's arm, leaving her with multiple lacerations. Passers-by rushed to her aid and paramedics were called to the scene. Leanne was taken to a local hospital, where doctors stitched up her wounds, which weren't deemed life-threatening. While subsequently speaking to a media outlet, Leanne said she felt lucky to have survived the mauling, admitting it had been wrong of her to ignore the barrier. The woman added that the zoo should consider moving the fence back to prevent other visitors from making the same mistake. Number 5. Phelan Smith. On June the 27th of 2019, Phelan Smith was at the 69th Street Red Line station in Chicago, Illinois, while on her way to retrieve some papers from her downtown office. As she was waiting for the train, Smith dropped her cell phone, which tumbled down the train tracks. The 37-year-old woman climbed down to pick it up, ignoring the warning sign telling riders to stay off the railway. Smith was on the tracks for only 17 seconds before being fatally hit by the Chicago L train. Following the woman's death, her family asked for the adoption of a Phelan Smith Act, requiring train stations to install guardrails, more warning signs, and bigger staffing numbers. Surveillance footage released later in the investigation showed that the train's operator hadn't been paying attention to what was happening in front. Approximately 12 seconds before the accident, he'd been looking out the window and making hand gestures at the ongoing traffic. After the video surfaced in the media, he was fired for violating guidelines regarding train operations. However, transit authorities stated that it was impossible to determine if the train could have been stopped in time to avoid the fatal impact. Number 4. Ayano Tokumasu. 20-year-old Japanese woman Ayano Tokumasu was visiting the Niagara River on August the 14th of 2011. Tokumasu, who was a student at a Toronto language school, climbed up on the railing to get a better look at the Niagara's famous waterfalls. After stepping up to the barrier, the young woman lost her balance and fell into the water almost 80 feet upstream from the brink of Horseshoe Falls. Tokumasu was swiftly carried by the current and swept over the precipice, which stands at over 180 feet. Emergency workers searched the area with boats and helicopters in an effort to find her body, which was eventually retrieved several days after the tragic incident by the Niagara Parks Police. Andrea Smith and Jason Watson, a Canadian couple vacationing in the area, were reported to have inadvertently been captured in the same photo with Tokumasu moments before she suffered the fatal fall. The photo, picked up by multiple media outlets, showed the young woman in the background after she'd already climbed up the stone ledge on which the barrier sat. Number 3. Dale Whitehurst. While walking home near Wolstenton Retail Park in Stoke-on-Trent, England, Dale Whitehurst decided to take a shortcut in June of 2021. In doing so, the man attempted to climb a 7-foot metal palisade security fence. He managed to get up on it but then slipped, resulting in his jeans being pulled down around his ankles and cutting the blood flow to his feet. As he fell over, Whitehurst hit his head and was knocked unconscious. The 44-year-old was left hanging upside down on the fence, with jagged spikes piercing both his ankles. When Whitehurst awoke, he couldn't feel his legs. Whenever he tried freeing himself, the jeans only twisted tighter around his ankles, until the pain would just knock him out again. His phone was out of reach, so he tried screaming for help but received no response and ended up being stranded on the fence for 5 days. The man subsequently recalled thinking he was going to die and that he'd started experiencing hallucinations due to the high summer temperatures. At night he would get cold and start feeling the lack of food and water while trying to survive. Whitehurst managed to get hold of an empty soda can in which he'd urinate and then use for hydration. On the 5th day, he heard people walking by again and started screaming loudly. 3 young men approached him, and as one of them ran to get help, another went to get him water. Whitehurst later learned one of the men was an off-duty police officer. Firefighters responding to the emergency call had to cut down nearby trees to release him. He was taken to the Royal Stoke Hospital, where doctors told him they needed to amputate both of his legs because they were severely infected and covered in dead flesh. Medical staff reported that Whitehurst had had oxygen trapped inside every organ and described his survival as miraculous. Number 2. Joshua Thomas Taylor. Joshua Thomas Taylor was driving along with his family on Interstate 65 near downtown Nashville, Tennessee on May the 5th of 2022. When his child threw his favorite toy out of the window, 32-year-old Taylor decided to keep driving, only to return later that night to search for it. He drove back to the area at around 9 p.m., parked at an off-ramp and got out of the car to look for the toy, but he was unable to find it. The Tennessee Department of Transportation help truck drivers approached him and tried to talk to him. Potentially startled by them, Taylor then ran across the interstate and jumped over the barrier to the northbound side. The truck drivers immediately started traveling to the opposite side of the interstate when they heard a loud collision. Moments after jumping the barrier, Taylor was hit by an SUV and subsequently pronounced dead at the scene. According to a statement released by the police, the driver involved in the accident didn't display any signs of impairment and he hadn't been crossing the speed limit when the impact occurred. Number 1. Madeleine Davis. On the night of January the 11th of 2020, Instagram model Madeleine Davis and her friends were at a party in Vaucluse, a suburb of Sydney, Australia. At around 6 a.m, they all decided to visit Diamond Bay Cliffs, a popular selfie spot nearby to watch the sunrise. In an attempt to get a better photo of herself with the view, 21-year-old Davis climbed over a safety barrier to go and sit on the edge of a cliff. At some point, the young woman lost her balance and plunged to her death more than 250 feet. Witnesses later reported to have heard her friend saying she has gone before they called the emergency services at around 6:32 a.m. Her lifeless body was found wedged in a rock shelf, roughly 55 feet below the surface of the sea. Police didn't suspect foul play in the incident and a coroner recorded a verdict of misadventure. Further investigations revealed that Davis had a mix of alcohol and drugs in her system. The coroner noted that the substances had likely impaired her balance and decision-making. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be forced to never exceed the posted speed limit in your car or revert your internet speeds back to the early 2000s? Let us know in the comments section below.